So let's drill into a bunch of cryptic hints about the upcoming 40k narrative arc. We've got lots of Tau things, plus just possibly a baby Lionel Johnson. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today we're talking about Games Workshop's Arks of Omen narrative arc once more. And I thought today we'd do a bit of a roundup of the teasers that they've given us of the future, and what's going to be coming to the Arks of Omen storyline. So far in the Arks of Omen series, we've had the two books come out, Abaddon and Angron. There's been a few quite fun lore developments in those, plus we know the next book is going to be the Vashtor one, and the one after that almost certainly seems to be Farsight, judging by the various different Tower emblems that we've got so far. Then after that we've got a fifth book that's as yet unrevealed. Judging by the rumours and their hints so far, that one almost certainly seems to be the Book of the Lion, an old Primarch coming back to Warhammer 40k to stand against the forces of Chaos. Games Workshop has dropped a whole bunch of teasers as to the unfolding narrative, though perhaps one of the most entertaining ones has been the system of tarot cards that they've had going for a good few months now. We've had one of them a week, and I feel like my early suspicions were right that it looks like there's going to be 4 cards per book, so we're sure to get a set of 20 tarot cards in the end, and so far we've got up to card number 17. These little pictures and whimsical little bits of audio seem to generally be kind of figurative as opposed to just literally showing us what it is picture for picture. With a fair bit of the styling and the colours used for each card though, it does imply what sort of races or factions they're talking about within the 40k lore, and roughly whether things might be going good or bad for them. So far the first 2 books' tarot cards do check out pretty well with the story inside them. The first 4 gave us Galaxy Despoiler Hulk and Key, where Abaddon and Vashtor want to conquer the galaxy, tame a whole bunch of space hulks and go off in search of their key to unlock their super weapon. In the Angron book we've got the Hound, the Host, the Shattered World and the God Emperor inversed, and in that book Angron, whom I'm guessing is the Hound, leads a whole host of World Eaters against a great big beacon of peace and prosperity within the Imperium, win a major victory, literally shatter the world, and I think that the God Emperor inversed basically just implies that yes, this is a major Imperial setback. Then the next 4 that we had, presumably for the Vashtor book, are Demon, Astartes, Lightning Tower and Demon Inversed. The Astartes and the Lightning Tower cards look very Dark Angels, both in terms of green robes, and the Lightning Tower emblem that's the symbol of the Deathwing. We already know that from Games Workshop's teased shot of that book, that Vashtor attacks the rock, and presumably Azrael is left to try and defend against him. I'd guess if God Emperor Inverse means a major Imperial setback, then Demon Inverse probably means a major setback for Vashtor. I guess we'll wait and see on that front. After that though, it gets a bit more interesting, as these are the books that aren't actually announced yet. We've got 5 more cards to try and interpret. I guess the first 4 are mainly going to revolve around Farsight and the Tau Empire in that book, and then the last one, potentially featuring a baby Lionel Johnson, is the first of the last book. Let's take a look at the cards and see what kind of clues they might show. First up, the 13th card in the set was the Horde. By the pattern of 4, this will be the first card of book 4. The leading text at the start of it, in this sort of Imperial faux Latin type thing, is Bestiaris Magnifacta, and the audio reads, "As a horde descends, scarlet and crimson souls, blood-drunk, blood-maddened, flooding the galaxy." On the card, we've got a hand reaching out from under a great pile of rats, and it's reaching up towards Commander Farsight's Dawnblade, the mysterious, possibly chaos-tainted relic that Farsight found on an abandoned world, and this was the artifact that allowed him to break free from the Ethereals. I've seen a few people speculating that the Dawnblade might actually turn out to be part of Vashtor's key, so it's quite possible that Chaos might go after it, and maybe send a great horde towards them. In a few other comments I've seen a few people getting a bit excited about a huge horde of rats. I think like with a lot of the other cards though, this one's figurative, it's not just literally, yes, there are going to be Xenos space rats, though I'm sure a fair few people would quite enjoy the idea of Space Skaven in Warhammer 40k. I feel like the rats could represent a few different things. It could just literally be something as simple as a chaos invasion to try and get the Dawnblade. With the event of the last book, Angron destroyed a great beacon, and by sacrificing this affront to Khorne, an entire section of the galaxy went a bit blood mad. It could be that there's a whole load of violence and aggression due to that. Well, I was kind of wondering whether it could potentially represent orcs. They have teased a model of Snickrot, and seeing as orcs are Farsight's most hated foe, there's at least a small potential they could feature in this part of the campaign. Overall, I'd guess this means that the Farsight enclaves are probably going to be beset by someone at least. It wouldn't really be Warhammer 40k if they weren't having some vast battles for one reason or another. Next up, the 14th card is the Young Warrior. The flavour text reads De Bellicosa Novitius, and the audio reads, "A light gutters in the endless black, it may scourge the red tide or drown beneath it." We've then got a young chap leading a rather tau-looking horse, and the horse has got some red armour. They look like they're at a crossroads and going one way or the other. The young warrior again carries the Dawnblade, and between that and the red armour of the horse, I would guess that this guy's supposed to be Farsight. I'd guess that it's not representing an actual human figure, it's just being a little bit figurative. Perhaps the interesting idea for this one is that this one's called the Young Warrior. If this is the same Commander Farsight that's been fighting for the Enclaves this entire time, then you would have thought that he'd be very old by now. To my understanding, the lore is kind of mysterious as to how Farsight remains a figure in the Tau Empire for quite so long. They really don't live all that long in terms of their normal lifespans, though a few gets to live a little bit longer preserved by the greater good or something. I believe that there were different theories, like Farsight might have his life prolonged by the Dawnblade, or that it might be multiple successive generals taking up the mantle of Farsight, so while the individual might die, the legend lives on. I do kind of wonder whether this one might be referring to that, otherwise you wouldn't think of the person who's carrying the Dawnblade as being particularly young. The 15th card is called the Fool Inverted. The intro text reads Ignorama Invertus, and the audio states but here a change in spirit from fury to serenity. The card itself basically has a jester holding up what looks like an ethereal staff as opposed to the Dawnblade this time, standing on a field of what looks like blue-skinned corpses, so I guess that will be some Tau, a few ravens picking at those. Not sure what the inverted might mean in this. I guess if this card is the Fool, then if it's inverted it might imply something wise. I've seen people post things like it might represent Commander Farsight losing the Dawnblade or something, or perhaps represent the Tau Empire as a whole getting involved in the story in some way. It doesn't look like it's going too good for them, judging by all the bodies though. Lastly, for the ones that we'll be guessing for Book 4, this one's card 16, called the Tree of Life. The intro text reads Vitalitas Asperium, and the audio Hope blooms in the garden of lost souls and burning stars. Again, we've got that young warrior figure from earlier with his Dawnblade kneeling before a great tree this time, a whole bunch of stars in said tree. Seems to me that the culmination of this book might lead to Farsight discovering something, maybe something very important to help ward off the chaos. And I do wonder if this might even directly tie into the resurrection of Lionel Johnson back into 40k lore. After all, last time we had the Gathering Storm series, when it happened to be Inari messing around, the culmination of that story was a way to bring Rabute Gilliman back basically from the dead. Supposedly the Tree of Life itself apparently refers to a fabled tree within the warp, something that's very powerful and apparently might be able to heal the Emperor or do something else meaningful for the Loyalists, and it was the one that Lehman Russ went off into the warp in search for sometime after the Horus Heresy and was never seen again. I strongly suspect that this one isn't necessarily anything to do with Russ. I'd guess this is more symbolising something very important and a positive force for good. Going to be interesting to see what the lore of the 4th book entails. Finally, so far we've got Tarot card 17, The Lost Child. If we're going by our rule of 4s, then this would be the intro to the last book. The first text reads Purgator, and the audio A Fatherless Son, Alone in an Endless Night. I'd guess that this one is representing Lionel Johnson. He does have blonde hair on his miniature from the Horus Heresy, for example. The styling of the rest of the card does look kind of Dark Angels as well, deep green in colour. The idea of being a lost child could refer to multiple things. Could be now at the moment, say if he's gone from the rock somewhere and is out in the middle of nowhere. Or possibly could refer to him growing up on Caliban, I suppose. When the Primarchs were scattered across the galaxy, I believe that he crash-landed in the jungles of Caliban, somehow managing to raise himself into some maturity, despite the crazy multitude of horrors that should have killed him there by any right. If this is the first one in the last book, I would guess it might tell of a bit of an introspective segment. I feel like they're definitely going to hype it up a fair bit if they're bringing back a Primarch to 40k. There's probably going to be a bit of an introspective bit, something about where he's been physically and mentally since the days of the Horus Heresy, and how a 40k demigod is going to be thrust back into the current theatres of war. My guess would be that this represents the lion. I suppose it's not impossible it could instead refer to Dante. He's been rather resolutely trying to hold the Imperium Nihilus together despite all the horrors. I guess Blood Angels are often depicted with blonde hair, and he does have a red backdrop here. My guess would be that we're looking at a baby Primarch as opposed to Dante though. Overall, I think it's a fairly fun set of teasers, definitely not entirely clear, and I don't think you could predict the plots from the previous ones, but broadly speaking it looks like we've got Dark Angels versus Demons, a Tau story that's focused on Farsight repelling some great enemy, probably Chaos and maybe Angron's Cornate followers given the rest of what's been happening, and then somehow events culminate in the reawakening of Lionel Johnson, which might be set up by the previous book but only happens in the 5th. All guesses at this point of course. I do think that Games Workshop's done pretty well with this tarot series though. You can tell that a fair bit of thought has actually been put into these. I'm sure someone's had a lot of fun making them. In any case, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly try and cover the developments of this new series as it comes out, and talk about any models or rules that we get alongside. If you've enjoyed the video and you'd like to help keep them coming, I would just like to mention as well that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that linked down in the video description below. The channel's Patreon is what allows me to keep on making these videos each day, so if you are enjoying, any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.